Hey everybody, my name is Matt Marcellino. I'm an attorney here at Marcellino and Tyson, and I'm also here with Jennifer Moore, who's an attorney here in our office as well. She and I both practice family law. The firm does a bunch of other stuff, but family law is the topic of discussion today.
Yes.
And if you've watched any of our prior videos, the one we just did was about debt. There was one before that about equitable distribution regarding how to distribute marital property should you get separated and ultimately divorced. Who gets what? Who gets the house? Who gets the 401k? Who gets the silverware and so forth? That's what that was all about. And in those videos, we were just classifying, or at least trying to explain how we go about classifying separate property, marital property, and divisible property, right? But what we didn't do is we didn't talk about, even if we can identify what they are, how do we know how much they're worth? How do we value them, right? And that's the purpose of this video podcast. So talking about marital property, Jen, how do we value this stuff?
It depends on what it is.
Oh man, what a bummer.
I know, it depends. That's such a lawyer phrase. Sorry about it. But it does. It depends. So an easy example is a bank account, your checking account, your brokerage account, your savings account. We look at the statements. Simple as that. You pull statements, hopefully fairly easily, off of your bank website. You throw them to us in PDF into our very secure portal, and then we look at the value of those accounts as of your date of separation. So that's the most important thing, is that it's valued as of date of separation. Now, some of those values could change, fluctuate from date of separation to the date we actually divide the assets. So we may also look at that date of division value, but for today's purpose, we can just talk about it. The value is as of date of separation. And so looking at statements is a great way to come up with that value for some of those accounts. Mm-hmm. There are also other types of property that's a little harder to value. What do you think?
Houses, cars, intrinsic value of certain personal effects, that Fender guitar that I might have referred to on the front end. But the thing to be mindful of in North Carolina with equitable distribution, the court has to be fairly certain as to its value, because if it can't be valued, it cannot be distributed, right? So if there is something in your marital estate that's very important to you, or you believe has value, you got to put a value on it. And luckily for everyone, there's tons of experts, we might call them, that have the ability to appraise things such as guns. So many gun collections, right? How do we value each of these firearms, right? And so you have to get potentially someone to go and appraise these items. Same with potentially that Fender guitar, the house, raw land up in the mountain. What is it worth? And you have to have potentially a third party come out and say it's worth X amount of dollars. And hopefully everybody's in agreement with that, and that makes life easier. If one side is not in agreement, then they go and get their expert, their appraiser, and then you start to do the old, well, who's right sort of argument. Sometimes you meet in the middle, who knows, right? But like, so the again, is if you're trying to value it as of date of separation, outside of financial accounts that have statements, easiest one. I totally agree. Bank statements, 401ks, credit card debt, we hit on the last one, right? Mm-hmm. Easy, because there's a document that says as of September 7th, it had X amount of dollars in the account, right? But what doesn't have a financial statement is more tangible things. And that's where it gets a little strange into, like, how do we value this? Not to mention, I think the most difficult thing to value, businesses.
I was thinking the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So like you mentioned, hiring an appraiser for land or the Fender guitar, we hire business valuators who can value businesses. And there are a handful in town, I think, that we typically use, but they're forensic accountants. They're people who value businesses. That's their everyday job, and they dig into the P&Ls and the balance sheets and the all the bank accounts, and sometimes the value is maybe just the person. You think of it's a service type of business, construction or something similar to that. These people are they know how to value that intrinsic, hard to nail down lack of a paper statement value. Mm-hmm. So we hire an expert, and like you said, hopefully we're hiring maybe a joint expert, or maybe if you're having to hire your own expert and duke it out with the other person, maybe we're coming up with an agreed upon number. But that's the way we do it, and that can be costly. and it can take a lot of time. So that's something that hopefully your lawyer can identify needs to happen pretty quickly and get moving on that.
Yeah. Business valuation experts are used frequently, even outside of family law, right? So, because I do business transactional work as well, and sometimes we have to buy and sell companies, and those folks will step in and help us understand like how much we should pay for a business, how much we should sell for a business. Same guys come in within the family law world and say, here's what the business is worth, right? And they do all that stuff. And one step further, they also try to look at longevity, because there's so many different ways for them to do this. And maybe that's another podcast we could do, right? There's the asset-based approach, income-based approach. Like there's a lot that goes into it, and they could articulate that better than possibly we could. But it is a process, and it is not cheap.
Yeah.
Right. So we spoke about the cost-benefit analysis with your lawyers in some prior episodes. This is another one, because experts can be as expensive as your lawyer, sometimes more, given their shorter time period that they're actually working on a case. So you really have to think to yourself, like, what do I think it's worth versus how much I want to spend on an expert? Or can we just agree on a gross rev number with a multiple of 10% or something like that, or maybe even less, right? Or maybe it's just the assets in the warehouse, and that's it, right? So it's, so it can be difficult, but those things have to be valued. And again, they're valued as of date of separation. That's the most important part. More often than not, somebody will continue to work in the business, right, after date of separation. So what this business valuation expert will typically do is one of three things, right? They're going to try to value it potentially as a date of marriage if the business predated the marriage, right? Because I always refer to the goalposts: date of marriage, date of separation. So they'll look at the date of marriage if it predated the marriage, right? And then date of separation, what is its value as of the date y'all separated, right? And then, in all likelihood, someone is still working in the business. What is the value as close to the distribution date as we can come up with, right? Date of distribution is when a judge says who gets what and for how much money, right? But that's another piece. So typically there's 3 time periods. And why that's important is because let's say, I think you gave a very good example on 401k, right? So let's say that the business was worth $100,000 as a date of marriage, and the date of separation is worth $1 million, right? Well, that's a $900,000 growth. That $900,000 piece is likely the marital chunk, the value of the business, not the million. So you back out the 100 on the front end. And then Jim or Betty keep working in the business, and then come 2 years later, of course, sometimes these things aren't quick. 2 years later, when you go to distribute it, it's now worth $2 million. Well, the question then becomes, is that new $1 million valuation, is that marital or separate? And then you get into the active versus passive analysis, which is what we did in the debt section that we did in the last YouTube, and then the one before that, and try to figure out what is the actual value? And that's what these guys do, right? These experts. Same as what they'll do with real estate, same as what they might even do with that Fender guitar, et cetera, right? So they can place values not just on date of separation, which is absolutely important and necessary, but potentially other dates as well that'll help the court understand what is the thing, what is it worth, who gets it.
Right. And the active work done on the business after date of separation, even though it is active, it could still be marital depending on how that work is done. So that's nuance to this situation that requires that expert and requires your legal team to really delve into that.
Yeah, like Jim and Betty, right? So if Betty's still working in the company, the one question they always ask is, well, did Betty change any type of procedure? What's new about the business, or is it just on autopilot and she's just in the office making decisions as she's always done? Well, there's an argument to be made that might be passive, and the full freight of the $2 million in that hypothetical might be marital. Right?
Exactly.
So, but if she's doing something different, bringing in new clients, if there's some change in it, then maybe part of it's marital, part of it's separate. Again, forensic accountants, guys that love numbers and math, that's where they step in.
That's right. And we're glad to have them because I don't know about you, but I don't love numbers and math.
I'm not a big fan.
We're lawyers.
Yeah. So anyway, so that is how we value marital property.
Yes.
Right. Data separation is king. Be thoughtful of the date of marriage. Did it exist as of time of date of marriage? Then you might have to do some math on that, right? So date of separation minus date of marriage, right? But that'll help you identify what is the value of your marital estate. And then from there, you can jump into okay, then who gets what, right? And back to our maybe not our first episode, but the one we talked about, equitable distribution, who gets what. It could be 55% to 45% split. That analysis comes into play because we're talking about numbers at that point. We're not talking really about assets.
That's right. Yeah.
It's dollars. Who's getting the dollars?
How are we dividing them?
That's correct.
And it's not necessarily equal, it's equitable.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep. So anyway, so hopefully that was helpful to explain how we go about valuing marital assets in a divorce proceeding here in North Carolina. If you have any other questions, always feel welcome to reach out to us. Love to speak with you more about scheduling a consult and so forth. So otherwise, thank you.